I'm in particularly familiar with is solitary. But the setting, the rooms, like, why do they have these different settings when you go in? Like, for example, you'll have a room where I met a lot of psychologists when I was in prison this time around because they evaluate you. There was a setting where we were at a table talking like this. There was another setting where we were behind the glass, the partition. And there was a setting where I'm in solitary confinement. You know, sort of like we described the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You go into the solitary. Let me talk about the solitary confinement in Florence. The lights never get shut off. You can't shut the lights off. So the only way you're going to get any kind of sleep is you're going to wrap. I used to wrap something around my head. I used to get a towel and, cover your eyes. Noise 24/7. I mean, you had guys, nobody went to sleep at a certain time. 24/7, you couldn't. Always somebody's up doing something. Banging on the door, yelling, screaming. And you had the psychologist going from room to room, let's say, or like right behind a closed, like a partition, and you're behind the glass. Is there any, from a psychological standpoint, as far as the settings are concerned, is there a method to that? Is it done by design?
Well, that's where you get into the whole issue of mental health and inhumane treatment. And in fact, my last year or so at the state hospital, I got myself a little bit into trouble because I inadvertently took on the advocate role for patients regarding inhumane treatment within the psychiatric or mental health hospital setting. When I would do in the jails that I was in, and I'm trying, is it the 4th Avenue jail? Maybe that's the one.
4th Avenue used to be. The 4th Avenue jail was the original. I don't know if the 4th Avenue jail, they moved it to Madison or Madison to 4th Avenue.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure either. But when I would go to people, they were locked in a room that was like the size of a bathroom almost, not that much bigger, with a cot in it, and it would be a glass wall. But they would have been locked in there for 30 days, 2 weeks, however long. In that case, people go insane from being locked in the room. In other words, the person is having emotional problems, but they're having emotional problems because when you put a person into solitary confinement, that's inhumane treatment.
But now, is that person on suicide watch? Because I remember there was a difference. Like if a guy tried to commit suicide, which I've seen guys try to take themselves out. And actually I did see somebody take themselves out. The kid hung himself in the cell. And all you seen was the body bags come out, and we knew he was gone. If a person tried to commit suicide and they failed, right, they would go and lock them up, put them in this Gumby-looking outfit, put them in a confined cell, which is what you're saying, no bigger than a bathroom, but it had all plexiglass around it, so you could see every move he's doing. And they would have a guard there sitting down 24/7, taking notes. If the guy got up to go to the bathroom, they write down, he's taking a piss. He's sitting down, he's reading, he's sleeping. He's, full monitor, all his meals, everything coming through. It's a miserable, and you're on display. Like, in other words, you're just in this. And the reason why I know this is that I never tried to commit suicide. When I was in El Paso, in Latuna, Texas, a jail called Latuna, FCI. It was in El Paso, Texas. The head of psychology, the director, she called me in and she says, Frank, I want you to help me with something. I said, what is it? She says, I want to start. They were low on staff. That's what it really was. I mean, I think part of it was they wanted inmates to handle it because we could relate to another inmate versus a guard, right? But she was short-staffed. It was coming right off the pandemic and everything. She said, I want to start a suicide buddy program. I said, what the fuck is that? She said, well, guys who are on suicide watch, you go there and you take the role of I said, I'm not going to go there and write, everything the guy's doing. No, but just go there and talk to them. They need people to talk to. She said, I'll pay. I said, I don't care about the money. I said, whatever they're paying in there, you're not going to, are you going to pay 50 cents an hour? Who cares? Keep the money. But it was part of your programming, But I did it more so because I'm like, well, let me see if I can make an impact, get through to some of these clowns that, hey, it's not worth it to kill yourself over. Yeah? So I did. I started the Suicide Buddy program. And I went into the Suicide Watch. And the first guy, I never forget, was a Mexican kid. He had 2 years to go. He was an illegal alien. He crossed over 5 or 6 times. He already got sentenced. He's doing his time. He's got 2 years to go home. But he doesn't want to go back to Mexico. He wants to stay here in the United States. And he knows he's going to get deported. So he wants to kill himself. So he's in this Gumby-looking outfit. They put you in green. And I got him in this cell that I'm describing where there's all plexiglass around and you can see, every move he's making. He's on display. The guard in the tower, the control booth, everybody could see him. Even the other inmates you could see who was on Suicide Watch. He did speak English, not, fluent enough to understand and talk and communicate, And I just sat, by his cell and I would just, talk to him, Anyways, the program got so popular, it was a success that now everybody wanted to do it because she was paying people. And guys now were raising their hands going, I want to do it, I did it for like maybe 2 months. After that, I said, look, you don't need me to do this. I said, the program started up. I said, you're happy, they're happy, it's a win-win for everybody. You're talking to a guy and it's like, okay, the guy would tell you his problems and, it's not that I've been through everything, because you got to empathize with people too, right? But the guy would think his problem was a problem and you're like, well, I've been through that. Don't worry about it, and you provide like a solution. Then he starts thinking, oh, okay. So like a guard couldn't tell him that. God couldn't say, well, yeah, I've been through it. It was interesting because when they did get out, they stood out. And that's what she wanted. She wanted them off Suicide Watch because it cost a lot of money to keep them there and all this stuff. And the goal was when they come out is to stay out, not keep trying to kill themselves to go back in, like you're saying. They made it real miserable for them inside that you don't want to go back. Now, what you're saying, like with the hospitals and different places where they keep people, the meals are better here, there. The guy might keep trying to kill himself for that reason because to stay where he's at. They made it so miserable that the last thing you want to do is hurt yourself. Or if a guy really wanted to hurt himself, he really did because he knows where he's going. I did probably total in solitary confinement. I added it up one time. I thought about it. I didn't do 3 years straight. But if you added up all the time between my last bid back in the early 90s and then most recently, I added up, it was about 30, I would say about 38 months total. It was like a 5-month stretch or a 10-month stretch. This one was 14 months I was in solitary during the pandemic, the COVID and all that stuff. They locked everybody down. The good thing was that I didn't have a cellmate. I was by myself. I never forget when I came out of there, right? And I got into population. One of my friends that I made friends with said, Frank, your skin tone, you're green. Because you don't go out anymore. You could go out, but it was too much of a hassle for me. You had to turn around with your hands to your back. A sergeant has to be there and a cop has to be there and they have to handcuff you. Now they got to walk you out. It's like a big scene, right? Then they walk you out and they throw you in a cage that there's enough room for my dog, It's maybe a 5x5 cage. And there's no room really to move around that much. And you just, I guess maybe you get some vitamin D, get some sunlight. But it was too much of a hassle after a while to go out for an hour. So when the cop would come by and say, hey, you want to come out? I'll pass. I don't feel like going through the whole show just to go out for an hour and then, go back in, handcuff again, the cuffs to this, to that. So after a while, you just don't care no more. Like you were saying, you just don't give a fuck. You're like, you want wreck? F you. Or you want an extra piece of bread? F you. After a while, you just get to be like, you know what? Fuck it. Fuck you. So like when the psychologist would come by the door, hey, you feeling okay? Yeah, fuck you. What do you call that?
Well, under those circumstances, you call it normal.
No, but I mean like.
No, and I'm not kidding. In other words, if you create highly abnormal circumstances for people, you have to expect that the way they're going to react is not going to be the way they're going to react if they're under regular lifetime circumstances. So yeah, you're reacting in a way because of the pressure of the circumstances you're in. And that's what happens.
One thing that helped me was a technique that I learned that I didn't even know was scientifically proven. There was an old-time gangster that when I was younger, that I was around a lot. His name was Joe Beck di Palermo. He was the guy, I don't know if I forgot. Yeah, it's exactly those are the cages I'm talking about, but right before the picture. So Joe Beck was the guy who was on the yard in, I think it was in Atlanta. Joe Valachi, you ever heard of him?
Mm-hmm.
Joe Valachi was the first big government witness to come forward against the mob.
Mm-hmm.
He got paranoid that Vito Genovese was going to put a hit on him, you know? And Joe Valachi was a tough guy in his own right. You know, I know people are going to say, well, he ratted, he's not a tough guy no more. But Joe was a bona fide tough guy, just he cooperated. I guess, you know, some people think that goes out the window when that happens. But I look at it like, you know, you don't change. You're still a man. Joe, he thought he wanted to kill Joe Beck. So he thought there was this guy there that was Joe Beck because he thought Joe Beck was going to kill him. So he hit the guy with a pipe on the yard and killed him. But it wasn't, you know, he missed Joe. But it was meant for Joe. Make sense? Then they took Valachi out.
Oh, I see. Valachi meant to kill Joe Beck, but the guy he killed was not actually the Joe Beck.
Right. So they built a special housing unit for Valachi, and it was in Latuna, Texas. It's called the Valachi Suite. So the president at that time, I forget who it was, built him a suite right off the jail, part of the jail. Matter of fact, when I went there to Latuna, Texas, they all know it's a famous, well, infamous place, the Valachi Suite. And they put a lot of high-end, high-powered witnesses there. Like, you know, I think Gas Pipe was there, Leonetti, like a whole bunch of guys been through there. You know, the feds would put you there for however long. So that was the Valachi Suite. But Joe Beck did 36 years in jail total. So he told me, he said, we would talk about the times where he was locked up, and he was in Alcatraz with Al Capone and Bumpy Johnson. You know, it goes back that far. Funny story was I was on a trip with my sister and her kids, my nieces. And, you know, they go to Alcatraz, they want to do the touristy things, you know, in San Francisco. Let's go to Alcatraz. I'm like, who the wants to? I don't want to go to jail for, on vacation. But what I'm doing is I'm just doing it for my nieces because I'm like, okay, let me just take them there, you know. I'm the only man that's going to take them. So we take the ferry over to Alcatraz, and, you know, they walk you through the yard, and they walk you through the kitchen, the mess hall, and then you got a tour guide, a correctional officer taking you through, this is where they used to eat, this is where this is where that, and I'm looking, I'm just, you know, shaking my head. And these were the cells and all that and everything. And here's our most infamous people that were here, and I had a wall of pictures. And whose picture was there was Joe Beck's. So it's surreal because you're saying, I spent years with Joe on the street. And to see his picture there, and then the cop, the tour guide is talking like they knew Joe Beck. I'm sitting there laughing because I'm an insider. Well, people don't know, you know, so who's going to call him out? I wasn't going to raise my hand and say, hey, that's bull. Joe never did this and did that and all that other thing. Anyway, what I'm getting at is he told me that he says one time he was locked up in solitary, I don't know for how long, and he thought he was going crazy. So what he did was, there was times where he would lay down at night and just scream, yell to the ceiling. And that would help him. But another thing that he used to do that really helped him out a lot was he used to go up against a wall and just talk and have a conversation. So I guess he would pick who he wants to talk to that day, and he would go face up to the wall and just talk. I used the same technique when I was in solitary because I thought of Joe Beck. And I think at that time it was, I was on a 10-month thing. I had to stay in the hole for like almost a year. And I think I was into it like month 5, month 6. You got time to think, and you're thinking, you think all the voices and the people that you were around. And I tried it. I would pick who I was going to talk to that day, go up against the wall, face, and just have a conversation. Well, I later learned, years later when I was in therapy, in intensive therapy, that I don't know who was held captive. It was I don't know if it was a German or whatever scientist, scientifically proved that that's some kind of technique that the captives, whoever was being held, used to keep their sanity. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't heard of it. It's very fascinating, though, what you're saying. I mean, and yeah, I do know that there's a whole area of psychology that deals with people who are, whether it's kidnapped or whether it's held captive or whatever it is, and how they mentally survive that, and different things that they do that help them and seem to work for them. And this technique that you're talking about is really fascinating, but it is important to find ways to keep your sanity, because it does go back to this idea that if you put people in circumstances that are so outside the normal and create that kind of environment, that stresses the human psychology. And unless people find a way to maintain their sanity, at least while they're in those circumstances, they are going to lose their sanity. They're going to hear things, they're going to see things. There's a lot of truth to that. And there is a whole area of psychology about that. I would say when I did people who were in for any length of time, whether it was because they wanted to commit suicide, or sometimes you had people who were sort of a little bit had some mental illness, but once they would go into solitary, their mental illness related to the fact that they were in solitary. That's why they were having mental illness.
Because of the solitary.
Because of the solitary, absolutely. And I would put that in my report often if I thought that was the case, that, this person's mental illness is due to the fact that they're in solitary.
Well, Doc, I can't tell you how ecstatic I am to have you. It's a pleasure as a friend and as a professional for you to come here today. And I guess I'll see you when I see you.
Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate it.